Amen, amen. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Welcome. So we now turn to Kinetzion, the blessing, before we begin our Torah study. And thanks for joining us this Shabbat. If you could unmute Ami, we would hear your lovely voice and guitar.
I am so sorry, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר ים מירושלים. כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר ים מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו, תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. And we continue with saying the blessing before coming to the Torah, coming to the study of the Torah. And you replied to me, Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah haya Eloheinu melech ha'olam. Asher bachar banu im kol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah haya noten ha'torah. Amen.
Amen. So in a minute, we'll turn to the Torah study. I'm just going to say a few words so we can take down the slides for a moment. And so we're in the book of Leviticus, which is an interesting book because it's filled with sacrifices and elaborate vestments and dressings and clothes for the priests and anointment of the priests and a lot of interesting things. And one of the things that I've thought about this, a couple weeks ago I sent out a video with some ideas about how I think about these different sacrifices and what they can mean rather than an actual physical sacrifice, but what is the psycho-spiritual relevance of these sacrifices or the meanings of them today in our lives. And in this, we're going to do a little bit of last week's Parsha and some of this week's Parsha. It's very detailed about these sacrifices, so we're not going to spend tons of time in them. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is the role that priests play in protecting the community. And in the Torah, they protect the community by offering these sacrifices. And in last week's Parsha Tzva, the sacrifices are offered by the priests. In the previous Parsha, they were offered by the people themselves. And one of the things that happens in Tzav, is that the priests have to relinquish their regular means of earning money. In other words, they rely on the community to ensure their sustenance, to ensure that their needs are met. So it's interesting to me because there's this class of people, the priests, who are holy people that we turn to alleviate us to provide atonement for us for their sacrifices, through their sacrifices. And their sole job is to protect and serve us and to ensure our individual and collective psycho-spiritual well-being, but they're not paid. They rely on us for their well-being. And I think about the way communities and governments are run today, where the job of a certain group of people, certainly in our governments, is theoretically to prioritize the well-being of the community and to trust that their intention is to take care of the well-being of the community, and in response or in kind, they get their sustenance needs met by us. But we don't have that system, actually, right? We have a system of bribery in our country where they don't rely on us, but they rely on people with money and power to provide for them, and not just for their sustenance, right? Not just for their basic needs, but for elaborate needs. And then they end up turning away from their jobs, which are to serve the well-being of the community, and instead serve the well-being of those who have funded them. So we'll read a little bit about that. And then in this week's Parsha, Shmini, it continues with these descriptions and discussions of the sacrifices, and it takes this strange turn, and we'll read about that. And then we come into some discussion in this week's Parsha about kashrut, what animals we can and cannot eat. And I'll share some ideas and thoughts about that. And we'll jump in as we do with questions and comments from all of you. And then we'll have some thoughts to share in breakout room. So if we could start with, my dyslexia makes me say it wrong, but it's zav, not zava, because my dyslexia twists the letters around, which I actually find very fascinating that our brains can do that. Just switches things around. I actually, this cracks me up. It makes me very intrigued at the power of our brains to turn things around and then still say it. So we'll start with Sa'av. If we can share that on the screen, Austin, that would be awesome.
Yeah, 1 second, Rabbi. I wasn't aware that we were starting with that today. So give me 1 second.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
About a little nigun while we're scrolling. This is done in every synagogue. The Torah is never at the right place, and people have to roll it. So Austin, thank you for rolling the Torah to the proper place.
Beautiful. And so here we are. Thank you. Would somebody be willing to read for us in English?
I'll get the ball rolling, and then we'll defer to someone else. Tzav. Yud He Vav He spoke to Moses, saying, "Command Aaron and his sons thus. This is the ritual of the burnt offering. The burnt offering itself shall remain where it is burned upon the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar is kept going on it. The priest shall dress in linen raiment, with linen breeches next to his body, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar and place them beside the altar. He shall then take off his vestments and put on other vestments, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a pure place. The fire on the altar shall be kept burning, not to go out. Every morning the priest shall feed wood to it, lay out the burnt offering on it, and turn into smoke the fat parts of the offerings of well-being. A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. And this is the ritual of the meal offering. Aaron's sons shall present it before Yud He Vav He in front of the altar. A handful of the choice flour and oil of the meal offering shall be taken from it, with all the frankincense that is on the meal offering, and this token portion shall be turned into smoke on the altar as a pleasing odor to Yud He Vav He. What is left of it shall be eaten by Aaron and his sons. It shall be eaten as unleavened cakes in the sacred precinct. They shall eat it in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. It shall not be baked with leaven. I have given it as their portion for my offerings by fire. It is most holy, like the sin offering and the guilt offering. Only the males among Aaron's descendants may eat of it, as their due for all time throughout the ages from Yud He Vav He's offerings by fire. Anything that touches these shall become holy. Yud He Vav He spoke to Moses, saying, This is the offering that Aaron and his sons shall offer to Yud He Vav He on the occasion of his appointment. 1/10 of an ephah of choice flour as a regular meal offering, half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening shall be prepared with oil on a griddle. You shall bring it well soaked, and offer it as a meal offering of baked slices of pleasing odor to Yud-He-Vav-He. And so shall the priest, anointed from among his sons to succeed him, prepare it. It is Yud-He-Vav-He's, a law for all time, to be turned entirely into smoke. So too every meal offering of a priest shall be a whole offering. It shall not be eaten. Yud-He-Vav-He spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and his sons thus. This is the ritual of the sin of offering. The sin offering shall be slaughtered before Yud-He-Vav-He at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is most holy. The priest who offers it as a sin offering shall eat of it. It shall be eaten in the sacred precinct in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. Anything that touches its flesh shall become holy, and if any of its blood is spattered upon a garment, you shall wash the bespattered part in the sacred precinct. An earthen vessel in which it was boiled shall be broken. If it was boiled in a copper vessel, the vessel shall be scoured and rinsed with water. Only the males in the priestly line may eat of it. It is most holy. But no sin offering may be eaten from which any blood is brought into the tent of meeting for expiation in the sanctuary. Any such shall be consumed in fire. Would anyone else like to continue? Otherwise, I will. Anyone else? It's great to read. It really is.
I would read if for two. I have a cough, so I may burst into coughing. I apologize. And I wonder, Austin, could you just make the text a tiny bit bigger? Thank you so much. Good. I messed this up.
You're going the other way, Austin.
Wrong way.
There we go.
There we go. Right
I'm
way.
so sorry. This is the ritual of the guilt offering. It is most holy. The guilt offering shall be slaughtered at the spot where the burnt offering is slaughtered, and the blood shall be dashed on all sides of the altar. All its fat shall be offered, the broad tail, the fat that covers the entrails, the two kidneys, the fat that is on them at the loins, and the protuberance on the liver, which shall be removed with the kidneys. The priest shall turn them into smoke on the altar as an offering by fire to Yud-He-Vav-He. It is a guilt offering. Only the males in the priestly line may eat of it. It shall be eaten in this sacred precinct. It is most holy. The guilt offering is like the sin offering. The same rules apply to both. It shall belong to the priest who makes expiation thereby. So too, the priest who offers another person's burnt offering shall keep the skin of the burnt offering that was offered. Further, any meal offering that is baked in an oven and any that is prepared in a pan or on a griddle shall belong to the priest who offers it. But every other meal offering, with oil mixed in or dry, shall go to the sons of Aaron all alike. This is the ritual of the sacrifice of well-being that one may offer to Yud-He-Vav-He. One who offers it for the thanksgiving shall offer, together with the sacrifice of thanksgiving, unleavened cakes with oil mixed in, unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of choice flour with oil mixed in, well soaked. This offering, with cakes of leavened bread added, shall be offered along with one's thanksgiving sacrifice of well-being. Out of this, the person shall offer one of each kind as a gift to Yud-He-Vav-He. It shall go to the priest who dashes the blood of the offering of well-being. And the flesh of the thanksgiving sacrifice of well-being shall be eaten on the day that it is offered. None of it shall be set aside until morning. If, however, the sacrifice offered is a votive or free will offering, it shall be eaten on the day that one offers the sacrifice, and what is left of it shall be eaten on the morrow. What is then left of the flesh of the sacrifice shall be consumed in the fire on the third day. If any of the flesh of the sacrifice of well-being is eaten on the third day, it shall not be acceptable. It shall not count for the one who offered it. It is an offensive thing, and the person who eats it shall bear the guilt. Flesh that touches anything impure shall not be eaten. It shall be consumed in fire. As for other flesh, only one who is pure may eat such flesh. But the person who in a state of impurity eats flesh from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's sacrifices of well-being, that person shall be cut off from kin. When a person touches anything impure, be it human impurity or an impure animal or any impure creature, and eats flesh from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's sacrifices of well-being, that person shall be cut off from kin. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus: You shall eat no fat of ox or sheep or goat, fat from animals that died or were torn by beasts may be put to any use, but you must not eat it. If anyone eats the fat of animals from which offerings by fire may be made to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the person who eats it shall be cut off from kin. And you must not consume any blood, either a bird or animal, in any of your settlements. Anyone who eats blood shall be cut off from kin." And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people thus: The offering to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh from a sacrifice of well-being must be presented by the one who offers that sacrifice of well-being to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. One's own hands shall present Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's offerings by fire. The offerer shall present the fat with the breast to be elevated as an elevation offering before Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The priest shall turn the fat into smoke on the altar, and the breast shall go to Aaron and his sons. And the right thigh from your sacrifices of well-being you shall present to the priest as a gift. He from among Aaron's sons who offers the blood and the fat of the offering of well-being shall get the right thigh as his portion. For I have taken the breast of elevation offering and the thigh of gift offering from the Israelites, from their sacrifices of well-being, and given them to Aaron the priest and his sons as their due from the Israelites for all time. Those shall be the prerequisites of Aaron and the prerequisites of his sons from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's offerings by fire, once they have been inducted to serve Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh as priests. These Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh commanded to be given them once they had been anointed as a due from Israelites for all time throughout the ages. Such are the rituals of the burnt offering, the meal offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, the offering of ordination, and the sacrifice of well-being, with which Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh charged Moses on Mount Sinai when commanding that the Israelites present their offerings to Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh in the wilderness of Sinai.
Okay, we're going to stop here with this parsha, and we can take a moment for having some conversation before we go on with the next parsha. So there's a few things I want to share, and then open it up for some questions and reflections from folks. So there's a midrash about the elevation offering, and this midrash in Vayikra Rabbah speaks about repentance as if one has gone up to Jerusalem, rebuilt the temple and the altar, and brought these offerings in the temple. Now, of course, I'm not advocating for rebuilding the temple, God forbid. But then what they do is they talk about it as a psycho-spiritual way, which I thought was interesting, because if you remember when I gave a video about Vayikra, I talked about how these sacrifices could be looked at through a psycho-spiritual lens, and what each sacrifice might mean for us psycho-spiritually as well as politically, collectively. And so what they speak about is that every Jew, we could say every person, right, could be a human temple unto themselves. And if he is holy, then or she is holy, or they are holy, then this personal temple is holy. And if we sin, then we contaminate it. And repentance allows us to return and recreate our own inner holy temple. And so this to me is really what the high holidays are about, right? It's an opportunity for us to recreate our holy temple, and we look back upon our year and we look about our missteps. And not only do we repent, but ideally we engage in teshuvah, we engage in reparations. And this could be, right, they're speaking about it as individuals, but I also want to highlight the fact that for me, this is also about how we create holy community and how we create holy societies. Is that we reflect upon, are we actually embodying and creating holy temples within ourselves, within our communities, and within our world? And if we're not, what repairs, what teshuvah, what repentance, and what reparations are needed? And we're certainly living, I mean, one of the beautiful things about this historical moment, perhaps, is that we're actually having these conversations. They're tumultuous, they're difficult, we're fighting over them, but we're having them. And certainly in my lifetime, that was not conversations we were having 20 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. So these are conversations now that we're really engaging in, and there's resistance, and there's friction, and there's bumping up against each other. But at the same time, we're really talking about how do we create holy communities, holy selves and holy communities and holy societies and in a holy world, so that people can thrive, so that all life can thrive and the planet can thrive. And so we could think about what we just read as like the level of vigilance needed, the details, right? The specificities and levels of vigilance and attention that's needed to really be able to create holiness, holy temples within ourselves and in the world. So that was the first thing I wanted to talk about. And then I was reflecting on this image of these fires that keep burning, the fire that keeps burning, and it's not supposed to go out, and it's this endless burning. And again, as I'm thinking about it in a psycho-spiritual way, I thought about the fact that maybe it's speaking to the need for us to be attentive to our own inner fires, to that, the burning bush that Moses saw that awakened him to say, oh, something's really wrong in this world and I need to go address it. I need to go take action. And so maybe this idea of burning fires is so that we're constantly seeing that burning bush. So we're constantly able to look at what needs to be transformed in our world and step up and have the courage to engage. And maybe we need some fire under our feet, fire in our homes, fire in our bellies, to do that work, because it's not easy. If you saw my video from this week that I sent out, I spoke about what's happening in Gaza and the horror of it. And I said that I don't know if I said it quite this fully, but I was noticing within myself this tension of, I really want to speak out at this really boldly. And I have received, even in some of my posts, some pushback from people. It's not a genocide. The Hamas is using human shields. It wasn't really what happened in the hospital. They didn't intend to bomb the aid workers. And I was receiving pushback, and I noticed myself shrink in the face of that. And as I started that video, I realized I'm not going to shrink in the face of that anymore. I'm going to speak what I hold to be my truth, and we can have conversations about that. But that was my fire. That was like the fire energy of this elevation, of this fire offering, this burning fire that I was imagining coming to me and saying, no, you need to speak this truth. This is what is really unfolding. And as painful as it is, maybe as scary as it is, I say, even though if your voice cracks and your knees shake, speak it, speak these truths. And so that's what moved through me on Thursday night when I made that recording, and so I'm thinking about it as this fire, this burning fire that keeps burning. And maybe my embers were being maybe my flames were being put out a little bit by these messages. But then they got sparked again. And thank God we have those opportunities for our embers to be sparked and our fire to keep burning, because that's really what's called for in this moment. So then there's the peace or thanksgiving offerings. The shalom is the word that was used in the Parsha in Hebrew, shalom, wholeness and peace. And in our prayers, if you remember, Ami and I spoke at the beginning about gratitude and the importance of gratitude and moving into deep prayers of gratitude and moving through that gratitude into, and I always like to say, moving through that gratitude into bringing us into action, which is one of the really powerful things about Jewish teachings, is that when we give gratitude, when we express gratitude and gratefulness, gratitude for what we've been given, it's not to like pat us on the back and make us feel good. It's actually so that we then engage in the world from a place of gratitude and help to create a different world. That's actually a key Jewish teaching, is our gratitudes are to inspire us to engage and participate in creating more blessings in the world. And so this peace offering, this Thanksgiving offering, to me speaks to the power of the practice of gratitude and how important gratitude is in our lives and in helping us engage in the world. And I'm sure some of us are aware of the research that shows that when people keep a gratitude journal or have a daily gratitude practice, it actually changes the way they engage and see the world. And so that's why when we're doing those morning blessings, I invite you to call out your gratitudes so that we can really inspire us with our gratitudes, with our blessings, to then engage in actions and transformations in the world. And I'm going to open up for some questions or reflections as soon as I'm just going to go through these few things. And then the Thanksgiving offering, Todah, the offering of Todah, gratitude, thanksgiving, it's interesting, you bring both leavened and unleavened bread. And so chametz, the leavened bread, we're coming up to Passover. Chametz is that part of us that's arrogant and stuffy and full of ourselves. And then the unleavened bread is like cleaning ourselves or releasing ourselves into moving away from constriction and stuffiness into a more free place. And so this holding of both shows us that we need to both hold the places where we're arrogant and also release that arrogance, but also at the same time offer up the places where we're constricted and where we need space and where we need to hold ourselves with more compassion. So I think that's the next chapter that we didn't read was the consecration, the anointment of Aaron and his sons in this elaborate anointment of oil. And I think I've spoken before about the scene in the movie Origin, where the Dalit anoint each other in this radically powerful scene in this movie, where the Dalit are the untouchables and they go in and they clean the latrines, they clean the places where people relieve their bowels. And there's this amazing scene where they anoint each other with oil. That is the only thing they have to protect themselves from going into this latrine. And it's this beautiful act. And when I saw it, I immediately thought of the anointment in the Torah, and maybe there's something really powerful about anointing each other and ourselves in this sacred holy act. And maybe not only does the oil provide protection, but maybe the sacred act of being present with each other and treating each other with such tenderness and kindness, like Mother Teresa washing people's feet. Maybe that is what really protects people and holds and supports their human dignity and their respect in the face of such undignified, I won't even call it works, enslaved actions, work, quote unquote. So those are my thoughts for last week's Parsha, and I'm going to just open it up for a few reflections, questions, anything that folks want to share, and then we'll jump into some of the stuff about this week's Parsha. Anybody?
Before coming in, I was kind of struggling with something I was reflecting on from a Devar Torah I heard last night about the silence and Aaron being silent, and thinking too of the free will offering and how, as an individual, and I feel like as a millennial, and I feel like those millennial and younger probably have felt this too, maybe here, but that feeling of not being enough or seeing our ideas utilized by those who are older, um, not giving us our full, or even in relationships, only noticing for me, and you talked about fire. I'm a Sagittarius, so I have fiery moments. But I think about those times of it seems like people only would honor me as a person when I was gone, but not when I was there in the
Mm,
wholeness of my being. So I
mm,
like your interpretation of it,
mm,
of that.
mm.
Just to say, but I think about that in that personal way of
Yeah.
we don't honor the whole person, it feels like, anymore. We only honor them when they end or when they're gone from us.
Mm,
I've noticed that so much in my own life.
mm. Thank you, Carl. And we will be reading the Parsha about, we're coming up to the part about Aaron being silent. Um, so for those, you will hear that in a few moments. Thank you for that reflection, Carl. Anyone else? Yeah, Lynn, please. Shabbat Shalom. You're muted. I don't know if you realize that. Oh, you're trying to unmute. Okay, I wasn't sure. I couldn't see your mouth.
I'm sorry I'm so late, but I'm also so unaware that this understanding of that anointing of one another that you were describing, which is including touch. It is truly that sense of our whole being as you said so well, to be respectful, but it is also something that allows the work that includes what is what in some way we're ashamed of. And I think shame comes in here a whole lot. And the work that I've been looking at with, maybe you know of her, Brene Brown, who writes so much about how to deal with these issues. To be brave is how she puts the words. And that has a significance. It's an acronym. But these understandings of truly what are the ways in which the spirit, the spirit in us is restored is really what I hear you speaking so clearly. Thank you very, very much for doing that.
Thank you, Lynn. Heidi, please.
Yeah, I think my question is almost a follow-up to Lynn's. I was struck by there's an offering, a guilt offering and a sin offering. So that's suggesting that there is something different about the sin offering and the guilt offering. And I wonder if you could offer some interpretation or some help with kind of understanding that distinction. I mean, I like to feel that I feel guilt when I sin. So is there something else? And then, of course, I think it does lead over to the whole issue of shame that Lynn was talking about.
So I'm not, my memory is that one has to do with like an intentional act and one has to do with an unintentional act. So we have to, and I don't remember off the top of my head which one is which, but one has to do with something that we at least intentionally or were cognizant of us doing, and something that we were not cognizant of, we unwittingly participated in. And so they require different offerings because of that. And so for one, we're going to have more shame potentially than the other, right? If it was something we were cognizant of, like we're aware of the fact that we're causing harm, or we're aware of the fact that we're supporting genocide, maybe there's more guilt. And if we are not aware and it's unintentional, it's unwitting, maybe there's sin, but there's not guilt in the same way. Does that help, Heidi? Yeah. So those are the distinctions. Neil, thank you, Heidi.
This is a really important topic, at least from a psychodynamic standpoint. The difference between guilt and shame is that in guilt, somebody experiences sort of like during the high holiday seasons, there's a gap between my values, my intentions, and my actions. And the healthy part of guilt is it becomes a course correction to then do something to get back in line. The most famous example of that is a family therapist named Chloe Medanas, who worked with Vietnam War veterans who were both deeply depressed and had substance abuse issues. And they organized into units to go back to Vietnam and do things like build water treatment plants and things that make atonement for, regardless of the reason why, the things that was devastation to the civilian population. In that sense, guilt is a good thing if it's a wake-up call and it gives us an opportunity to take corrective action.
Right. Yeah, when we are able to look at our actions and honestly reflect and don't go into shame, which often then sends us into blame and attacking, then we can engage in teshuvah and reparations. And as you said, I think that's the beauty of high holidays, is that it when we talk about it, when I talk about it, it's always really important that we be honest and reflect honestly about our missteps, and that we hold ourselves with compassion in that process, because we're all perfectly imperfect. Nothing in this world is perfect. None of us do anything perfect in this world. And the act of repair and reparation and self-reflection is walking in the steps of the divine. And I'll say something about the divine in Teshuvah later when we talk about Rosh Chodesh. But it is walking in the steps of the divine, where we realign ourselves. And we even saw that with Abraham arguing with the divine, right? And divine says, okay, if there's 10 good people, there's various times in the Torah, Moses says, don't wipe out all the people. You don't want to do that. And so God says, okay, I won't. Even the divine course corrects at times, not always, and maybe not every time we'd like, but there are opportunities. And all we can do is walk in that step, in those paths of trying to do the best we can do, and then repair when we don't. So thank you, Neil. Yeah. Todd and then Andre.
Hello, sorry I was late. I wanted to highlight what Neil just said and referred to. I think that's the answer, but is to get into these groups and teams and have therapy basically for the world. But we can't even get these monsters that are calling the shots here to stop killing people. But anyway, that to me is something that would have to be done if we can get to the point where we could actually go over there and talk to people, kind of apologize and commiserate, and we have to turn things upside down first. So yeah. I think that's the answer. If we, God gives us a miracle to be able to do that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Andre.
I was just thinking about the train wreck of guilt and shame both coming together and resulting in depression, leading to depression and plunging, in my case, me into depression. And I like I'm finding the more uplifting way of looking that you're interpreting and others of the sacrifices as a way of maybe coming out of that depression and of getting a move on, is Neil referred to as this group of Vietnam veterans. That's all.
Thank you, Andre, and I appreciate everyone's personal sharings are so meaningful. Thank you. And as you spoke about, 1 second, Naomi, I see you. Thank you. As you spoke about coming out of your depression, it brought me back to the fire offering and the embers kind of just low burning, as if like maybe they're in a depressed state and they just need a little spark. So maybe when we're struggling, we can both turn inward to try to get that spark, but also to turn to others to try to help us uplift ourselves. and to always hold ourselves with compassion. Ami, please. Thank you.
Yeah, just a brief word about something you talked about before we got into the various sacrifices, was the issue of gratitude, and how gratitude opens us up to eventually proceed with action. And like we were doing in the prayer service earlier, that's how the service is structured, is that we start with gratitude and offering blessings of gratitude and our own sense of gratitude, which then leads to our being open enough to be able to sing, and accompanied with humility, to be able to praise all that with which we're part of and which we are a small part. And just the word for song is zemer, but the word for power is zimra, and it's the same idea, that to be able to sing, furthering opening ourselves up, is power, and that eventually leads to action. So the formula is all there so brilliantly in the prayer service, and just that's all I wanted to say about that. And humility allowing us then to proceed to action. Ridding our ego of defensiveness and inaction by feeling too small and too defensive.
Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. Now we will continue with Shmini, and don't think we'll have time. We'll see to read the whole thing, but we'll jump around a bit. And, so if somebody wants to start reading, that would be great.
So shall I start with on the 8th day?
Yes, thank you, Catherine.
On the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, "Take a calf of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering, without blemish, and bring them to Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh. And speak to the Israelites, saying, take a he-goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, yearlings without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh, and a meal offering with oil mixed in. For today Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh will appear to you." They brought to the front of the tent of meetings the things that Moses had commanded, and the community leadership came forward and stood before Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh. Moses said, "This is what Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh has commanded that you do, that the presence of Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh may appear to you." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Come forward to the altar and sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering, making expiation for yourself and for the people, and sacrifice the people's offering and make expiation for them as Yud-Heh-Vav has commanded." Aaron came forward to the altar and slaughtered his calf of the sin offering. Aaron's sons brought the blood to him. He dipped his finger in the blood and put it on the horns of the altar, and he poured out the rest of the blood at the base of the altar. The fat, the kidneys, and the protuberance of the liver from the sin offering he turned into smoke on the altar, as Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh had commanded Moses. And the flesh and the skin were consumed in fire outside the camp. Then he slaughtered the burnt offering. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, and he dashed it against all sides of the altar. They passed the burnt offering to him in sections, as well as the head, and he turned it into smoke on the altar. He washed the entrails and the legs and turned them into smoke on the altar with the burnt offering. Next, he brought forward the people's offering. He took the goat for the people's sin offering and slaughtered it and presented it as a sin offering like the previous one. He brought forward the burnt offering and sacrificed it according to regulation. He then brought forward the meal offering, and taking a handful of it, He turned it into smoke on the altar in addition to the burnt offering of the morning. He slaughtered the ox and the ram, the people's sacrifice of well-being. Aaron's sons passed the blood to him, which he dashed against every side of the altar, and the fat parts of the ox and the ram, the broad tail, the covering fat, the kidneys, the protuberances of the livers. They laid these fat parts over the breasts, and Aaron turned the fat parts into smoke on the altar and elevated the breasts and the right thighs as an elevation offering before Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh, as Moses had commanded. Aaron lifted his hands toward the people and blessed them, and he stepped down after offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the offering of a well-being. Moses and Aaron then went inside the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the presence of Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh and appeared to all the people. Fire came forth from Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar. And all the people saw and shouted and fell on their faces.
I'm going to jump in here for a moment. Oh, I thought that was on my screen. I was trying to close that. So I'm going to jump in here. So at the beginning of this chapter 9 that we just read, it says, this is what Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh commanded you to do, so the presence of Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh may appear before you. And then Aaron has to offer these offerings. And so I was thinking about this, and the way I'm thinking about this is that if we fail to humble ourselves, Ami, you were just talking about humbling ourselves. If we fail to humble ourselves and recognize our missteps and atone for them, now we can have lots of different ways for atoning. Here it's with these elaborate sacrifices, which we could have a whole wild conversation about the fact that our people were doing these elaborate kind of trippy experiences of sacrificing, and everyone's bowing down to them, and it's quite a scene, right? But if we fail to do this, then we actually lose our connection with the divine. And I'm noticing that at times I can find it difficult to want to really look at myself, really look in the mirror and ask myself, where am I misstepping here? Maybe I'm feeling hurt, and so it's harder. Maybe I'm really angry at the world, what's going on in the world, so I don't want to really reflect on, am I being too righteousness in my rage? And yet this teaching is really that the work that we have to do is our own work. And we talk about this a lot at High Holidays too, that we don't worry about other people's teshuvah. We worry about our own. It's our own soul's work, our own heart's work, our own life's journey work. And so this is we have to humble ourselves before we can otherwise and repent, and otherwise we lose the connection with the divine. And humbling ourselves and allows us to come back into connection. The other thing that's in this chapter, which I find very interesting, is that before Aaron can do the atonement for the people, remember Aaron's also doing atonement for people. In Vayikra, the people were doing it, but in these two parshiot that we're reading this week, Aaron's doing it, the priests are doing it for the people. But before they can do it for the people, they have to atone for their own sins. They have to be free from sin. So I always think about this in terms of spiritual leaders, right? Like, what is the work that spiritual leaders or any community leaders need to do before they can do the work of caring for and holding the needs of the community? And really, it's a deep process of doing self-atonement and self-reflection. So those were my two reflections on chapter 9. We can continue unless somebody wants to jump in. We have some prayers that we're going to add in today because of Rosh Chodesh, so I'm trying to move us along a bit more quickly so we can end on our time today. So Catherine, you want to keep reading chapter 10?
Sure. And fire came forth from Yud-Heh-Vah-Heh and consumed them, Thus they died at the instance of Yudhevavhe. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what Yudhevavhe meant by saying, through those near to me, I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Uziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said to them, come forward and carry your kinsmen away from the front of the sanctuary to a place outside the camp. They came forward and carried them out of the camp by their tunics as Moses had ordered. And Moses said to Aaron and to his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, do not bare your heads and do not rend your clothes, lest you die and anger strike the whole community. But your kin, all the house of Israel, shall bewail the burning that Yudhevavhe has wrought. And so do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die, for Yudhevavhe's anointing oil is upon you. And they did as Moses had bidden, and Yudhevavhe spoke to Aaron, saying, drink no wine or other intoxicant, you or your sons, when you enter the tent of meeting, that you may not die. This is a law for all time throughout the ages. For you must distinguish between the sacred and the profane, and between the impure and the pure, and you must teach the Israelites all the laws which Yudhevavhe has imparted to them through Moses. Moses spoke to Aaron and to his remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, take the meal offering that is left over from Yudhevavhe's offerings by fire and eat it unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in the sacred precinct, inasmuch as it is your due, and that of your sons, from Yudhevavhe's offerings by fire, for so I have been commanded. But the breast of elevation offering and the thigh of gift offering, you and your wife and your sons and daughters with you may eat in any pure place, for they have been assigned as a due to you and your sons from the Israelites' sacrifices of well-being. Together with the fat of fire offering, they must present the thigh of gift offering and the breast of elevation offering, which are to be elevated as an elevation offering before Yudhevavhe, and which are to be your due and that of your sons with you for all time, as Yudhevavhe has commanded. Then Moses inquired about the goat of sin offering, and it had already been burned. He was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and said, why did you not eat the sin offering in the sacred area? For it is most holy, and it is what was given to you to remove the guilt of the community and to make expiation for them before Yudhevavhe. Since its blood was not brought inside the sanctuary, you should certainly have eaten it in the sanctuary as I commanded. And Aaron spoke to Moses, see, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before Yudhevavhe, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten sin offering today, would Yudhevavhe have approved? And when Moses heard this, he approved.
Okay, I'm going
Yudhevavhe
to pause us here for a moment because it's kind of its own chapter, and then we're going to go into the kashrut, what we can eat and what we cannot eat. And so what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to ask Austin to put you all in breakout rooms, and the questions that I can put in chat for everyone is, this is a really fascinating, wild story. And I'll share some reflections when we come back, but I want to give you an opportunity to just engage with each other about, how do you make sense of this story of Aaron's sons being consumed by God? It says that it's a strange or alien fire. What might that be meaning? What might that mean to you? How might you think about that in relationship to what's unfolding in our world and also in your personal life? And Carl, who's no longer here with us right now, but there's a really powerful thing in this story that Aaron is silent. And so I just invite you to reflect any thoughts you have or feelings that arise for you in the face of Aaron being silent in the face of his sons being consumed by the divine. So, how do you make sense of Aaron's sons being consumed by God? I've put this in the chat. And what feelings arise for you in the face of Aaron's silence? And there might be other questions or other thoughts that come up for you in your breakout rooms. And then we'll come back and then we'll talk about, if we have time, we'll talk about the, either we'll read the sacrifices, the kashrut laws, or I'll share some reflections about those with you. So we'll have about, like we normally do. What do we do? Like 12 minutes. One. Couple of rooms. We're still waiting for a couple people, I think. Am I right, Austin? Are they still in the rooms? Yeah. There we go. And there we are. Okay, awesome. Everyone's back. Oh, Heidi, sending you healing energy. We'll add your name to our prayers for healing. Poor thing. Coughs can last so long. Remember, I had that cough for a while. So, welcome back. Any insights, thoughts that want to be shared? I have some things I'll share if others don't share them, and then we'll go into the sacrifices and probably won't read it. We'll see. But there's some interesting insights on the kashrut, excuse me. But anyone want to share from your breakout room, please?
Sure.
Ami, of course.
I was with Lynn, and we spent time on this Aaron's silence, and in Hebrew the word is duma, and it's a verb form, and it's the same word that when we say on Rosh Hashanah, v'kol demama daka, the still small voice, demama. It's that same sense, and Lynn was talking about that silence was important for Aaron, not just because he was in a state of shock and grief, but it was also a state of being open, allowing for an openness to occur in the face of the unfathomable, and that's step one, really. Lynn was instructive to me that to step back, silence is okay. Silence is not necessarily a reaction, but an action leading to a breaking open and of the heart and the mind to then proceed. Yeah, there was so much in our talk. I'm probably not representing you well, Lynn, but yeah, it was good to just talk about that silence that we've all wrestled with. What was that silence about? Not just being dumbstruck, but also as an action by supposed inaction to open the heart, and that's what maybe we have to take in light of what's happening abroad in Gaza. We have to take that silence is okay, but not silence to inaction, but more as an opening of our heart to leading to action and courage.
That the silence makes me think of when you go into a house of mourning, and the instructions for folks who are not mourning is to be silent and let the people who are mourning dictate, if you will, what unfolds in that space. And so silence is a powerful place of listening to our own hearts and what's inside, but also to give space for others to speak or to remain in silence.
And that's that still small voice that we say every Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur that resides in each of us.
Yeah. Thank you, Ami and Lynn, for sharing. Naomi, are you wanting to share something? I see that you're unmuted. Maybe you're wanting to share, but if not, that's fine too. Naomi? No? Okay. Just seeing that you're unmuted. Okay, you're good. All right, thank you. Anyone else?
She can't. She said early on her volume isn't working. Is that correct, Naomi?
Her audio isn't working for us to hear her.
Or yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you, so you can put in chat, Naomi. you want to write something in chat, please do.
We can't hear you, Naomi. So just write it in chat if you would.
Thank you, Naomi. Anyone else? So I was thinking about like God consuming them in fire. What is this God that people get intoxicated? I mean, the way I'm understanding the story myself is like these men, they weren't probably that young, but they're still identified as sons. So there's still some way in which they're seen as perhaps younger and more childish, if you will. And they're in this scene, and this is an intoxicating, wild scene. If you close your eyes and imagine all these scents and smells and fires and burning, and I can imagine they're probably intoxicated in some ways by the sense and smell, and maybe they're like caught up in this awe and wonder and want to like have this radical connection with the divine, and they offer up this fire thinking this is how everyone else is doing it, I'm going to go do it too, and then they get consumed by the divine. And we could see that as a beautiful thing, like we're consumed by the divine, but I think most of us actually many times actually want to stay here on earth and have connections with the divine without being taken from this world and consumed by the divine. So that came up for me, like what is with this divine that is consuming them with fire, and what like did God like lose connection somehow with the divine's own holiness in that action? And then of course I go to thinking about like the fires and the violence and the that's been unleashed in Gaza, that's being unleashed in Haiti, that's being unleashed in so many places on our planet, some to extremes, some to less extremes. But I'm wondering about this, when I think about the young soldiers in Gaza and also in the West Bank, and the young settlers who are engaging in these incredibly violent, horrific acts. And I'm wondering to the extent to which they are being consumed with the intoxication of power, the intoxicating energy that has consumed them, this fury. And I think about the story of Job and the devil almost consuming the divine in that story, and unleashing this evil. And so I'm just wondering, that's what I've been thinking about. Like sometimes does this evil energy get unleashed in the universe, and it's not so easy, it turns out, to contain it. And we get consumed in that energy, in that fire. This is the opposite kind of fire that we were speaking about in the flames of the burning bush and the sacrifice, right? And then, of course, I'm left to thinking, this is child sacrifice. These people are being consumed. And when you read the story, then it says, in that same chapter, it says, I will be sanctified through those who are nearest to me. And so the way Moses understands this and tells Aaron is that some type of sacrifice needs to happen for the tabernacle to be sanctified. It has to be sanctified through someone. And Moses thought, of course, it would be Aaron or Moses because they're so great. But turns out it was his sons, Aaron's sons. And so Moses sees them as greater than himself and Aaron. But again, I'm stuck with this. Like, this is, I mean, we have in our Torah, like, this teachings about not engaging in child sacrifice. And here, these two young adults, young people, we don't know their ages, but they're being sacrificed essentially to sanctify the tabernacle and to make God holy. And I'm finding that really problematic. And I couldn't help but think about Aaron Bushnell, who chose to make himself a human sacrifice to fight, to make a statement about what's happening. And I find that have compassion, and I also find the idea of sacrificing one's life in that type of a way. I find that different from aid workers who didn't intend to sacrifice their lives. It's a very different choice. So these are the thoughts that were rolling through me as I was reflecting on this very, for me, a problematic and challenging part of our Torah. So I saw a hand up. I don't know, it went down. Mashiko, is that how you pronounce your name? Forgive me if I've said it wrong.
Yes.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna, you kind of took it in a little bit of a different direction than I was heading, but maybe I'll still speak it. That the fire, I'm thinking of how fire contained, like the fire in my wood stove is contained and it brings warmth. And in relationship to how the Moses encounters fire in the burning bush, we could assume that there's fire in all of creation, in a sense, the presence of the holy. In how it moved to the pillar of fire before the peoples, and how they're learning how to work with this fire, this holy fire, in a conscious way. What can go wrong? And as you were talking, I was thinking of how we are in a time of global warming, which fire is everywhere, and we're consuming our children. In a sense, we're consuming our descendants. And what holy fire means to me is, how do we contain it in the way of the essential qualities of God, the 13 attributes of mercy and truth, and how do we stay with that in the midst of all this burning, so that when we respond, when we bring our fire in the world, it's not out of self-righteousness, but it's in righteous engagement with others, with other peoples, with other beings, so that we're in alignment with, we're still in alignment, even in the midst of all that's going on.
Gorgeous. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. Really beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Neil and Debbie.
Very briefly, Kat, you introduced something that I had never considered before, that Moses was interpreting the incident as it required sacrifice. And then I recalled when him and his family were returning from Midian, the night in the tavern where we don't, it's vague whether this was God or a demonic force, but basically his wife saved him by taking a flint to the child, removing the foreskin, and literally referring to this as a bridegroom of blood. So where I'm going with this is perhaps Moses, who, yes, he was a vehicle for the divine, but he also had a complex life that through trauma experiences, he was interpreting this in a way that was not particularly uplifting, but was a reflection of his projections of a world of so much cruelty and chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Neil. And Debbie, you just jumped around on my screen. Where'd you go? There you are. You turned on your video, I think, so it moved you around. Hi.
I can't remember exactly the context that you were saying this in, but this is a response to something you said. My first journey to Israel Palestine was in 1996, and I remember being on a bus, and we had to go through checkpoints and etc. And I had never been around guns or rifles or whatever they were. And having these young men, really young men, come onto the buses holding these, in their uniforms and holding these lethal weapons. What I remember is thinking, what is it doing to their souls to have that kind of power? Part of it was over people who are older than them. Although I was in college at that point, which you could tell I was a non-traditional student, but there were others that were older than the average college student. It just it was unsettling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Thank you. I've been thinking a lot about the souls of the soldiers in Gaza. Yeah, it's hard to fathom how anyone comes back from these types of actions, you know. So I don't think we have time to talk about kashrut, but maybe I'll when I do my video for next week, I will include it in there because there's this beautiful teaching by Rabbi David Seidenberg that I wanted to give off to folks about some of these kashrut laws. So I'll bring that into my video so you can wait for that. And then I'll also talk about the Parsha for this coming week also. So thank you all for such a beautiful, rich Torah study. And now we continue in our service.
So we say the blessing after the Torah reading. Baruch atah ya Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. If anyone ever wants to